Good morning and welcome to this meeting of Strategic and Technical Planning Committee on Thursday, the 1st of May 2025. For the benefit of the public attending today or watching on the live stream, I'm Councillor Sari House, Chair of this committee, and my Vice Chair is Councillor David Bolwell. The meeting is being live streamed and will be available to view on the Council website after the meeting. By attending this meeting, you consent to being filmed, and can I remind everyone that when you are speaking, please speak clearly directly into the microphones so that you can be heard and seen. The Planning Committee is not a public meeting, but a meeting to which the public is invited. All attendees must comply with the ruling of the Chair. They must not interrupt the meeting or cause undue disturbance. To support this, please switch off your mobile phones or select silent mode for the duration of the meeting. And those using Teams, please ensure microphones are on mute and your device volume is set to 0 to maintain the audio quality. Only those who have registered to speak in accordance with the speaking protocol will be invited to address the committee for a maximum of 3 minutes. No material is to be circulated to members of the committee. We have 2 applications to determine today. The case officer will be invited to present the report and recommendations. And next, I will invite members of the public who have registered to speak to address the committee in the following order: public against, public support, applicant agent, town or parish council, and if there are any ward members that wish to speak, they will be next. Each speaker, whether speaking in favour or against, will have 3 minutes. Following public speaking, the planning officers will have the opportunity to address any salient points they wish to clarify, and committee members will be given the opportunity to ask any questions of the planning officer before moving on to debate. When we go into councillor questions and debate, for the benefit of the public watching, can the members state their name and ward when addressing the meeting? I'll try and help you remember that one. Okay. So, do we have any apologies today?
Thank you. Yes, we've received apologies for absence from councillors David Northam, Belinda Rideout, Spencer Flower, Tony Coombs and Richard Crabb.
Thank you. So we have with us today Councillor Craig Monks, Councillor Pete Roper, Councillor David Took, David Taylor and Councillor Borden. Officers involved in today's meeting are Philip Crowther, Senior Lawyer, Regulatory, Megan Rochester, Senior Democratic Services Officer, Anthony Nash, Senior Democratic Services Officer, Naomi Shinkins, Lead Project Officer, and Kim Cowell, Development Area Manager. We're also joined today by Ben, who is experiencing work experience with us. So welcome, Ben. Members have had the opportunity to look at the meeting minutes from the 31st of March. Are we content that I sign them at the end of the meeting? Thank you. Do we have any declarations of interest this morning? No declarations of interest. Excellent. So for the public attending today, you have 2 choices as to when you speak. You can either make your representations now, or you can wait until we've had the officer report, and then you can make your representation. Which would you prefer? Thank you. Okay, so everyone would like to speak after. That's great. So we now move to agenda item 5P, full 2023-03415, Woodlands Manor Farm, Horton, Dorset, and the officer is Naomi Shinkins. And Naomi, I invite you to start your presentation.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, members. This application is for a solar farm together with associated infrastructure at Woodlands Manor Farm, and the application has been referred to Strategic Committee due to the scale of the proposed solar farm. By way of update, there's a couple of errors in the officer report that I noticed after publishing. Paragraph 5.9 refers to North Farm being to the southeast. It's not, it's to the west of the Woodlands site, and I'll show this in some slides later. Also, paragraphs 16, 7, 20 of the officer report, the county archaeologist refers to fields 6 and 7. There are only 6 field parcels, which again I'll present, but the numbering of the field parcels changed during the application process. Also to note that the reference to the biodiversity net gain, where I refer to 74%, that's actually the habitat units only, and I should note there's also a 12% gain in hedgerow units as well. And finally, just to note, the Cranbourne Chase National Landscape Officer was in touch after reading my officer report, and he made some comments, one of which was the lighting condition should include in the reasoning that it's also to protect the integrity of the International Dark Sky Reserve of the National Landscape, and also to note that the reasoning for the Landscape Ecological Management Plan condition should also refer to paragraph 189 of the NPPF, which refers to minimising adverse impacts on designated areas. So in terms of the location and context, this slide shows the application site within the wider area, and as we can see here, you can see my cursor. It's between Verwood and Wimborne St Giles. This slide shows the application site in relation to the settlement boundaries of Horton to the southwest and Woodlands to the north, and we can see the application site in red. This slide shows the designations in the surrounding area and includes an area of great landscape value, various sites of specific scientific interest, Dorset Heathlands, obviously the Cranbourne Chase National Landscape, various nature reserves, and various ancient woodlands. This slide shows the application site as it's located within the designated green belt, where we can see the green hatch across the slide. And this slide shows the application site and its proximity to North Farm, again, which is to the west of Woodlands, which will be presented as the next committee item. This slide shows both sites and their proximity to the national landscape, and which is shown in red to the west. And the woodland site is approximately 380 metres from the national landscape at its closest point. Here we have the location plan. This site covers an area of almost 62 hectares, again in the form of 6 agricultural field parcels. The topography of the site is rolling with well-vegetated boundaries to the individual parcels, and the site is accessed from Horton Road to the west, as we can see on the slide here. This slide shows how well connected the site is via public right-of-ways, and we can see there's a public right-of-way that dissects the site and also public right-of-ways that follow the boundary line. The Mannington substation is located to the southeast of the site, as we can see here. A 47.5 megawatt grid connection has been secured for the proposed solar farms, and a cable route would form part of a separate planning application. However, if planning permission is to be granted, the cable route would be conditioned to require planning permission prior to commencement of the solar farm. This slide shows an overview of the operational renewable energy developments in the wider area. So there's Wedge Hill Farm, which is to the east of the site, Verwood Solar Farm, also to the east, Homeland Solar Farm to the east, Redborough Solar Farm to the southeast, then also the Holt Road Battery Storage System to the southeast of the site, and North Farm, which again will be presented next and is to the west of the site. So the renewable energy schemes tend to be to the east and the southeast, because obviously we have the Cranbourne National Chase to the west, hence the concentration to the east. So the site is surrounded by agricultural land in general, and Remedy Golf Club is to the east. The Riverside Lakes Camping Caravan site is located to the southeast. Again, the boundaries are well vegetated, particularly to the east and west. The surrounding landscape is predominantly rural, with a mixture of farmland, woodland, hedgerows, and some scattered residential properties. And Woodlands Manor Farm itself is located to the west of the application site. This slide and the following slide show views across the site as labelled, so we can see views within here from the looking east in the northern eastern field, and also views from the north again in the northern eastern field. Again, more views through the site and from the public right-of-way, so the E5915 and the E5917. And again, from the E5917, I think these images give a good indication, and the other images, of the rolling topography of the site and the containment of parcels and the vegetation, existing vegetation. And again, some more images from the E5917. So the proposed development itself is approximately 43 hectares of photovoltaic arrays. There would be 176 inverters, and these are located below the solar panel arrays. There would be 21 transformer units located across the site, and 4 storage containers also on the site, 1 switch room, boundary fencing around the site, access tracks throughout the site, and a CCTV system on 3.5 metre poles would be located around the site boundary as well for monitoring and security, and also various relevant communications and monitoring equipment. So the application was first received in 2023. Unfortunately, additional ecological survey information was required, which required seasonal surveys, and revised plans were submitted in December 2024 as a result of these ecological surveys. The amendments include passing places added to shared footpaths and construction routes, fence lines adjusted for foraging bats and birds, and some panel areas reduced to increase buffers, and also internal tracks had to be rerouted to provide buffers for the ancient woodland, and also there's an increase in the proposed planting. This slide shows the proposed plan. Again, it's 6 parcels with containers and a switch room located to the north of Field 4, which is located here. And the proposed will produce up to 30 megawatts of renewable energy. This shows the proposed site section where you can see the solar arrays, existing and proposed vegetation, and obviously the rolling topography of the site. This slide shows the transformers. There's 21 in total, and they're approximately 3 meters high. Again, located across the site at various locations. And this slide shows the switch room where there was only 1 switch room, about 3.3 meters in height, located to the north of parcel 4, as I mentioned, and the mitigation planting is provided around it. So there's some screening provided for the switch room. This slide shows the larger of the storage container units. There's 3 in total, about 2.9 meters in height, and they're located beside the switch room, again with the mitigation planting, and these storage containers are used to store spare parts such as spare panels and fencing and various equipment that may be required. This slide shows a smaller storage container. There would be 1 of these located with the other storage containers. It's approximately 2.8 meters in height, and again, located with the other containers in the switch room where there is mitigation planting for screening. Here we have the camera details, 3.5 metres in height, as I mentioned, and it would be located around the boundary fencing and needed for monitoring and security purposes. Here we have the panel arrays. They would be 2.4 to 2.6 metres in height at the highest point. They are 0.8 metres above ground, which does allow for sheep grazing on the site. And just to note that the woodland site is currently used for sheep grazing, and the intention is to retain that purpose with the existing shepherds using the site. This slide shows the proposed fencing, which would be 2 to 2.4 metres in height, and this photograph shows how the typical fencing will look. So in terms of the local representations received, the application was advertised by means of site notices and a press advertisement, and the objections, just a summary of the objections are set out in this slide. Key objections include the visual impact on the national landscape and green belt and heritage assets, loss of best and most versatile agricultural lands, that other forms of solar have not been explored, and also the cumulative impact. So section 9 of the officer report sets out a summary, and the full comments have been available online. In terms of support, there was 3 letters of support received, and that's shown on this slide. Comments include the importance of investing in green infrastructure and renewable energy, and the impacts of climate change and how this is acquired, and also that the visual impact is acceptable and how it can be mitigated. In terms of consultation responses, objections were received from Knowlton Parish Council and the ward member, Councillor Chakawata. There was an initial objection from the Cranbourne Chase National Landscape Officer and the Dorset Council Landscape Officer. However, the revised plans have overcome concerns, and both officers only had comments remaining. Also, any concerns raised can be dealt with by condition, as I'll explain later. There were comments from Natural England on the use of the agricultural land, and also comments from the Dorset Council Right-of-Way Officer and the Ramblers Association regarding the public right-of-ways. Just to note, there was no objection from remaining consultees, including the Dorset Council Conservation, Tree, Environmental Protection, Lead Flood Risk, Natural Environment Team, and Highways officers. Also, no objection from National Highways, Historic England, National Grids, or the Environment Agency. Just in terms of background, so before looking at the officer assessment, it's important to consider the background to the renewable energy and both national and local requirements relevant to solar energy. So in terms of national targets, it's to reduce carbon emissions by 80% by 2050, and this is compared to the 1990 levels, and this is a legal requirement. Also to decarbonise the electricity grid by 2030 and to increase solar capacity 5-fold by 2035. In terms of net zero, we have the Build Back Greener strategy, and it acknowledges the need for innovation and technologies to achieve net zero by 2050. There's also a number of national policy statements referring to the renewable energy infrastructure, and it sets out guidelines for applications and emphasises the importance of renewable energy. And in terms of local requirements, Dorset Council has declared a climate emergency and aims to lead in tackling climate change. And the Council also wants to achieve decarbonising the grid by 2035. So in terms of the officer assessment, this slide shows key considerations set out in the officer reports. The following slides that I'll present summarise the assessment, all of which is detailed in the relevant sections of the officer report for more detail. In terms of the principles of development, the Christchurch and East Dorset local plan does not reference planning policy in relation to solar farms specifically. However, Objective 3 highlights the need for renewable energy sources systems like solar farms with the requirement for renewable energy sources. Also, Policy ME5 encourages sustainable energy generation where adverse impacts can be minimised. Again, the NPPF sets out the points that I've put on this slide. The National Policy Statement for Energy sets out the policy for national significant energy infrastructure and states that it may be a material consideration for any relevant application. And given the nature of this application, officers consider that it is a material consideration here. The principle of the proposed development, which will help to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, is consistent with the aims and objections of local and national policies. And the principle of development is considered to be acceptable, subject to all other material planning considerations, which I will go through now. So in terms of the site selection, there were third-party concerns raised that a thorough site selection process has not been carried out. Key considerations in the site selection process include flood risk, landscape and topography, landscape designations, use of agricultural land, potential impact on heritage assets, biodiversity, proximity to sensitive receptors, and commercial agreements with landowners. And other key factors include a viable grid connection and land availability. So in the submitted environmental statement, the applicant has identified 83 alternative sites which were explored prior to the site selections that were made. The site selection process and consideration of alternative sites within the area has identified the woodland site and the North Farm site as the most suitable for solar farms. I should also note that the applicant has explored brownfield sites in the first instance, but options are limited with only 67 hectares of brownfield sites available on the Dorset Council Brownfield Register, and many of those sites already have planning permissions. So just by way of comparison, the woodland site is almost 62 hectares, and that 67 hectares is spread over 83 different sites, I think. Anyway, but based on the information submitted, the officers are satisfied an appropriate site selection process has been carried out. In terms of impact on the greenbelt, the NPPF states that inappropriate development is harmful to the greenbelt and should only be approved in very special circumstances. Harm can be assessed in both spatial and visual terms, considering factors like visual impact, volume, duration, and activity generated. Although the development is for 40 years, it still impacts on the openness for a significant period of time. I should note that the NPPF acknowledges that renewable energy projects in the greenbelt are inappropriate and require very special circumstances to proceed. And again, Policy ME5 encourages sustainable energy generation where the adverse impacts can be minimised. So the sites were chosen due to its connectivity to the national grid and lack of suitable alternatives that I've just mentioned. The development would contribute to renewable energy targets and national goals to reduce carbon emissions. However, the proposal would have a harmful impact on the greenbelt's openness, both visually and spatially, as set out in the officer report, and therefore very special circumstances do need to be considered, which I will address again at the end of this presentation. Just a note on very special circumstances, the NPPF does advise or does note that very special circumstances will not exist unless the potential harm to the greenbelt by reason of inappropriateness and any other harm resulting from the proposal is clearly outweighed by other considerations. The applicant has put a case forward for very special circumstances. This includes the temporary use of the site, so the lifespan of 40 years, the urgent need to provide renewable energy, also the generating capacity where this particular solar farm would produce up to 30 megawatts, and the project supports diversification of farm activities. So the NPPF acknowledges that very special circumstances may include the wider environmental benefits from increased renewable energy production, and this is a significant factor in this case. The proposal's contribution to national renewable energy goals is given substantial weight. However, the decision ultimately hinges on the impact on the greenbelt and other impacts being clearly outweighed by the very special circumstances. So just moving on to the landscape and visual impact. As mentioned previously, there are a number of landscape designations in and around the site. The landscape character type is rolling wooded pasture, and the landscape character area is the woodlands and Coal Hill and Hill Butts landscape character. So key features of the landscape character area include quiet, peaceful countryside, largely unaffected by modern development, narrow winding lanes with high, dense hedgerows, and extensive network of public footpaths and tracks. The landscape visual impact assessment that was submitted suggests limited impacts to the landscape character type, but does acknowledge adverse effects on local landscape, particularly for users of the public rights of way that do dissect the site and are around the site, as I mentioned. Adverse visual effects are mainly limited, however, to the immediate area and to the site itself. The medium and long distance views are generally screened by existing vegetation, but the site would obviously be somewhat more visible in winter. And just to give you an idea of the landscape and visual impact assessment and the proposed mitigation, the following slides will show views from what's viewpoint 8 up here, which is right on the edge of the national landscape to the north, and then from viewpoint 12 of the submitted LVIA, which is from Horton Tower to the south. So I'll just show those slides. So this slide shows the existing sites. We can see that we have, from viewpoint 8, we can see we have woodlands over here, and then we have the North Farm site located here. I'm showing both sites in context because I think it's important to consider them together rather than individually. This shows it with one-year planting, where we can see the glimpses of woodlands over here and some glimpses of the North Farm scheme located here. And this is with 1 year of mitigation planting. And this shows it with 15 years of mitigation planting, where the glimpses are less apparent and where the planting has increased. This is the existing view from Horton Tower. So we can see the North Farm site located here, the woodland site located here. So this is, again, the existing view, and the national landscape is located to the west of North Farm. This shows it with 1 year planting. So again, identifying some of the views that might be possible with 1 year planting. And this shows it with 15 years of planting. So in terms of proposed planting, it is proposed to mitigate the visual impact of the solar farm with additional planting. The planting has been amended in consultation with the Dorset Council Landscape Officer and also the Cranbourne Chase National Landscape Officer. The planting plans have been submitted and are deemed appropriate, but this is subject to planting stock details to be agreed with the Cranbourne Chase National Landscape Officer, which is a condition in the officer report prior to commencement. So with these proposed mitigation measures, the visual impact is considered acceptable and complies with policy HE2 and section 12 of the NPPF. And the impacts on landscaping are given limited weight against the development in the planning balance as a result. So in terms of impacts on the national landscape, as previously mentioned, there is a public right-of-way that dissects the site. This is the E5917, and I showed some views from that public right-of-way in the images earlier. So the National Landscape Officer has raised several concerns regarding the proposed development's impact on the character of the area, particularly the setting of the national landscape. Again, the site isn't in the national landscape, but it is within the setting. So the concerns raised include the impact on the tranquil countryside, especially from the public right-of-ways, the industrial appearance of solar farms, policy conflicts with the Cranbourne Chase National Landscape Management Plan, the cumulative impacts of the proposed with other existing solar farms in the area, and also the potential for the impact of construction traffic on the national landscape. So the Dorset Council Landscape Officer is satisfied with the additional information and revised mitigation planting, subject to securing the larger planting stock I've just mentioned with the Cranbourne Chase National Landscape Officer. In terms of construction traffic, a management plan is agreed with Dorset Council Highways and National Highways, and this predicts 2 to 5 heavy goods vehicle movements per day over a 28-week period, which is considered acceptable. Also, the concerns regarding lighting, underground cabling, appropriate planting stock, and changes to the landscape ecological management plan can be addressed by condition as set out in the officer report. This just gives you an idea of the view from the public right-of-way, the B5917, from within the site, and a reminder of the vegetated boundaries and the rolling landscape, which does make the application site somewhat detached from the national landscape and more contained within that setting. And again, just a reminder of the mitigation planting, the view from Horton Tower with 15 years of planting and the woodland site being located over here, and the national landscape to the west of the North Farm site. I do need to bring to attention from members the Countryside and Rights of Way Act, which is a statutory duty to seek to further the purpose of conserving and enhancing the natural beauty of the national landscape. The government guidance does note, as far as reasonably practical, relevant authorities should seek to avoid harm and contribute to the conservation and enhancement of the natural beauty, special qualities, and key characteristics of protected landscapes. It is agreed that the industrial look of solar panels cannot enhance the national landscape. That's just not reasonably practical. However, the site location and mitigation provided does help to conserve the natural beauty and contains the impact to the immediate site. In conclusion, the impacts are considered limited to the site and the immediate area with mitigation measures in place. The mitigation planting is expected to reduce impact, including cumulative impact, to an acceptable level. While primarily used for mitigation, the planting could also be considered to provide some form of enhancement to the local character area, which includes qualities such as the narrow winding lanes with the high dense hedgerows. Also to note that the proposal is temporary in the sense that the permission is for 40 years and it's also reversible, which helps mitigate the long-term impacts of the proposed. And overall, the proposal is deemed acceptable in terms of the visual impact and complies with relevant policies, with the impact of the character of the area, including the setting of the national landscape, given limited weight in the planning balance. In terms of heritage assets, as seen on the slide, there's several heritage assets in the surrounding area. And just in terms of that, the Dorset Council Conservation Officer has done an assessment, and they would only consider that Horton Tower would potentially be impacted by the proposed development of woodlands. The Conservation Officer does consider the impact on Horton Tower, however, to be minimal due to the distant views and natural vegetation and screening, as can be seen on this slide. The significance of Horton Tower or its setting is not considered to be challenged and results in no harm on the heritage assets. Historic England did initially object, but later withdrew their objections after a site visit and where they agreed with the Dorset Council Conservation Officer's assessment. And the proposed development is considered to have minimal impact, resulting in no harm on on Horton Tower, as I've just mentioned, and holds no weight in the planning balance. In terms of archaeology, there is some interest within and around the site, including Paleolithic and Mesolithic, Neolithic, Bronze Age, Roman British, early medieval and medieval periods, and post-medieval and modern periods. However, the applicant has carried out investigations on the site, which has been reviewed by the county archaeologist. There is potential for some archaeological material to be concentrated in the southern part of the site, and the county archaeologist has requested prior to commencement, or does require prior to commencement, a condition requiring a scheme of archaeological works, and that condition is included in the officer report. Historic England have raised no objections in terms of archaeology also, and the proposed development with conditions in place is considered to have hold no weight in the planning balance in terms of archaeology as well as the heritage assets previously mentioned. In terms of agricultural land, it is essential to retain soil functions and services through careful management to avoid or minimise adverse impacts on soil. The soil on the site is Grade 2 and Grade 3 best and most versatile agricultural land. Natural England have been consulted as the statutory consultee on this matter and advised the temporary nature of the development is unlikely to lead to significant permanent loss of best and most versatile agricultural land. The NPPF does emphasise the value of best and most versatile agricultural land and suggests poor quality land should be preferred for significant development where possible. Natural England, again, have been consulted. They have not raised an objection, but do recommend conditions to safeguard soil, including reinstatement, restoration and aftercare, and a soil management plan condition has been included in the officer report. Just to note that the applicant is leasing the land only and must return the land in its original state, which is secured by a separate legal agreement with the landowner. The woodland site is currently used for sheep grazing and mostly used for sheep grazing, and it is the intention to continue this agricultural use at the discretion of the landowner. Therefore, the loss of the agricultural land is acknowledged but justified, again, by the site selection process and secure grid connection that I mentioned earlier on in the presentation. And the loss of agricultural land is given moderate weight against the development in the planning balance. In terms of residential amenity, the nearest dwellings are 100 to 400 metres from the site boundary. Key amenity issues include the potential construction impacts such as noise, dust and vehicle movements, potential noise from inverters, particularly at night, potential light spill, and potential visual impact from the solar farm from nearby properties. Just to note that glint and glare is not considered to be an issue for this application, where solar panels are designed to absorb light, and the orientation of the proposed mitigation in relation to neighbouring properties is such that it would not cause an issue in this respect. So in terms of just the response from the Dorset Council Environmental Protection Officer, they have been consulted and they have advised that the noise impact assessment is acceptable. However, the noise measurements for the inverters, there are no nighttime noise measurements, so there has been a condition added requiring that the assumptions made in the noise impact assessment should be verified once installed, and if they don't meet the requirements as set out in the noise impact assessment, a mitigation strategy would be required. In terms of construction, a construction method statement condition is added to the officer report and deals with dust and noise and waste management. In terms of lighting, lighting would only be used for security lighting or on a need-to-use basis should maintenance, for example, be required in the middle of the night or in the hours of darkness. However, the lighting details haven't been provided, therefore the officer report includes a condition for those details to be provided prior to installation. The proposed landscaping and existing vegetation will reduce visibility of the solar panels, and the visual impact is considered acceptable in relation to the neighbouring amenity. And on this basis, it's considered to accord with policy HE2 of the core strategy, and the impact on neighbouring amenities is giving limited weight against the development in the planning balance. In terms of highways, the site will be accessed via the existing access from Horton Road, as mentioned previously. This access also serves Woodlands Manor Farm, Remedy Oak Golf Club, and the Remedy Oak Brewing Company. Construction is estimated to last approximately 28 weeks, as I mentioned, and again with an average of 2 to 5 HGV vehicles delivering each day. The site will produce very little traffic once operational, only required for maintenance purposes most likely, and a construction traffic management plan also considers the decommissioning phase. In terms of the construction traffic management plan, we've consulted Dorset Council Highways and the National Highways team. Neither have raised any objection to the proposed development. It's noted that the Parish Council have raised concerns about road conditions and the possible impact of construction traffic, but I have to note the existing access already accommodates large vehicles and the level of traffic for construction does not raise highway concerns. There are 4 public rights-of-way that adjoin the access road from that would be utilised from Horton Road. Again, the existing access is already used by the golf club and the brewery and Woodlands Manor Farm, and with only additional 2 to 5 vehicle movements anticipated per day, the Dorset Council Highways team have not raised objections to this on safety grounds. So therefore, the highways impact and access is considered to hold no weight in the planning balance. In terms of flood risk, the site is within a flood zone 1, indicating a low probability of fluvial flooding. The site is generally not affected by surface water flooding, as indicated by the Environment Agency risk of flooding from surface water mapping that you can see on the slide. The Dorset Council Lead Flood Authority have been consulted and they've raised no objection to the proposed, where it does not increase the impermeable area of surface water runoff. The proposed seeding may also help to reduce runoff. The gravel roads proposed are reasonably permeable, and the transformer installations does represent an increase of impermeable surfaces, but this is not significant, but also proposed rural sustainable drainage systems can mitigate the adverse effects of that. And the proposed development is considered acceptable in terms of flood risk, subject to condition, and holds no weight in the planning balance. In terms of trees and hedgerows are present across the site with well-vegetated boundaries and woodland areas. There's no trees with TPOs located within the proposed development area. The development will occupy the majority of the field compartments within the red line boundary. However, there are setbacks from existing landscape networks to respect the existing vegetation on the site. There will be some small areas of hedgerow that will be lost to allow for access. However, there is a net gain in hedgerow units, as mentioned under the biodiversity net gain. The Dorset Council Tree Officer has been consulted and has raised no objections, subject to conditions in relation to tree protection, and therefore the impact on trees is considered to hold no weight in the planning balance. In terms of biodiversity, there's a number of sites of scientific interest within the wider area, but these are 2 to 4 kilometres away from the site, as shown on this slide. Other designations include special areas of conservation and protection, Ramsar sites and local nature reserves. Again, these are within the wider area. Natural England has been consulted and an appropriate assessment has concluded no adverse effects on the integrity of the Dorset heathlands, and the impact is considered to hold no weight in, impact on protected sites is considered to hold no weight in the planning balance. So then in terms of protected species, there was initial concerns about compliance with the Dorset Biodiversity Appraisal Protocol in terms of protected species and biodiversity net gain. Species potentially affected include bats, great crested newts, breeding birds, hedgehogs and reptiles. As mentioned, additional ecological surveys were required and were carried out in 2024, and some changes were made to the plans based on these revised plans. The Natural Environment Team Officer has been consulted and has raised no objection to the PROs, subject to conditions including a management and monitoring condition and also details within the Landscape Ecological Management Plan. And in terms of impact on protected species, this holds no weight in the planning balance. Biodiversity net gain is offered at 74% in habitat units and 12% in hedgerow units. This is actually not a requirement for the site because the application was submitted before February 2024. However, this net gain is still being offered, as is now a requirement, but there is a significant net gain where in the planning balance, I've afforded this moderate weight in favour of the development. So moving on to the planning balance, before I do that, I just wanted to remind members of the local and national requirements that I mentioned and the substantial weight that should be given to these. Also that the NPPF doesn't require an applicant to demonstrate the need for renewable energy in paragraph 168. It is a given that it's required. In terms of the planning balance set out in this slide, there are considerations against and in favour. The impact on the green belt holds substantial weight. The loss of agricultural land is moderate. I've afforded moderate weight. The impact on the landscape area and visual effects is afforded limited weight. The impact on the character of the area, including the setting of the national landscape, is afforded limited weight. And impact on residential amenity is afforded limited weight also. In terms of no weight or neutral weight, that is in relation to heritage assets, flood risk, highway safety, Dorset heathlands, protected species, trees, mineral safeguarding, all of these where there's no significant impact. In terms of planning considerations in favour, the need for renewable energy is afforded substantial weight based on the local and national requirements. Also related to this is the environmental benefits, again, substantial weight, and the public benefit of providing renewable energy. The generating capacity is given significant weight. It's a significant contribution of up to 30 megawatts on this particular site. And the site selection is given significant weight due to the confirmed grid connection and the selection process and limited alternative sites. In terms of biodiversity net gain, again, it's afforded moderate weight, and the temporary use of the site is only afforded limited weight because it is for a 40-year period, which is significant. Just as a reminder, the substantial and significant factors in terms of very special circumstances, particularly the need for renewable energy and public benefits, outweigh the harm to the greenbelt and other considerations. Therefore, very special circumstances exist justifying the proposal in accordance with paragraph 153 of the NPPF. So in conclusion, as can be seen on this slide, all the planning considerations are considered acceptable, with most of those subject to planning condition that are set out in the officer report. And in conclusion, it is considered that very special circumstances have been demonstrated to outweigh the harm to the green belt and by reason of inappropriateness and any other harm from the resulting from the proposal. And as such, I am recommending to grant planning permission subject to the following conditions, which includes a commencement, approved plans and decommissioning conditions, cable routes, planning permission required prior to commencement, other pre-commencement conditions including the update to the Landscape Ecological Management Plan in consultation with the Cranbourne Chase National Landscape Officer, a construction environmental management plan, surface water details, soil management plan, construction management details, planting details, tree protection details, and the archaeological programme requested by the county archaeologist. Prior to installation, we would require the proposed materials, hard landscape details, lighting details, and security camera details. And in terms of compliance with the noise impact assessment, the ecological mitigation and biodiversity management requirements, and also the construction traffic management plan agreed with Dorset Council Highways and National Highways. And then other conditions include the cabling to be below ground, the potential for contaminated land if found, and the proposed construction hours. And that concludes my presentation.
Thank you very much. We now move to public participation. And this morning we have with us Colin Davidson, John Boyd, and Rupert Hardy. In any order, or we can, sorry? Oh, and Liz Alexander, applicant agent. Is it? Who have I got? Oh, this is the second one. Right, yeah. Liz Alexander, two similar, same piece of paper, two sides. Liz, do you wish to speak now?
Thank you, Chair. My name's Liz Alexander. I'm Planning Director at Lawrence Associates and agent for this application. The application is supported by recommendation for approval with no outstanding objections on any topics subject to conditions. There's considerable support for the development set out in policy at all levels, including the Government and the Council have declared an environmental and climate emergency. The Council has also declared ecology and nature emergencies and need 4 gigawatts of solar to meet their targets. The Government's Clean Power Action Plan seeks to achieve clean power by 2030, and a revised NPPF states the planning system should support renewable energy and applications should be approved if the impacts are acceptable. The site can generate up to 30 megawatts of clean energy. The total capacity of the combined projects at Woodlands and North Farm is limited to 47.5 megawatts by the grid connection and cannot be exceeded. The proposal secured a grid connection via the Mannington substation for energisation in 2028, meaning the project is both deliverable and a priority project for the national grid. The connection to the grid would be an underground cable, subject to a separate planning permission as required by the proposed planning conditions. The proposal seeks consent for a period of 40 years and would be fully decommissioned at the end of this period, returning the land to its present state. Changes have been made during the course of the planning application to respond to material planning matters raised by technical consultees and members of the public. Key design and planning considerations taken into account include removing some of the panels from areas of higher grade land and designing the site to allow the farming to continue, which has resulted in no objection from Natural England. Locating the panels to use existing woodland and topography to minimise views from the national landscape has resulted in no objection from the National Landscape Officer subject to conditions. The site's located within the Greenbelt. Very special circumstances have been demonstrated, including the wide-ranging environmental benefits associated with the increased production of energy from renewable sources. There are now no outstanding objections from technical consultees subject to conditions, meaning the proposal has been assessed as acceptable in terms of its impacts, which is a key policy consideration. In terms of the key benefits, 30 megawatts is capable of powering 8,500 homes. High levels of BNG are positive in terms of the Council's ecological and nature emergencies. There will be a range of socio-economic benefits, for example, local investment and community contributions. The site's designed to support continued agricultural use with species-rich grassland beneath the panels, allowing for the option of sheep grazing during operation. The biggest threat to food security is climate change itself. Thank you.
Excellent. Naomi, is there anything you wish to come back on that?
Nothing from me, Chair. Thank you.
So we now move to members. Have you any technical questions? Councillor David Taylor, Chelmsford St Mary's.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, Councillor David Taylor, Chelmsford St Mary, and member of the panel. A couple of questions springing up in mind, which I really just want some clarification. I'm not quite sure where to go to with these questions, actually. I think it'll be yourself. Yeah, okay. Ancient woodland has been mentioned twice now. Is that protected?
Yes, the ancient woodlands protected. The natural environment team have been consulted on this matter. The applicant has worked with the natural environment team officer to amend tracks that were going around the edge of the site that were in close proximity to the ancient woodland. So those have been amended to move away. So the tree officer has reviewed it from a tree perspective, but the natural environment team officer has looked at it from an ecological perspective, and those changes have been made in agreement with the natural environment team officer.
Another question. The second question is regarding the hedgerows. I've heard from several sources now that you're going to be taking out hedgerows regarding certain parts of the development, access and stuff. Pretty jumpy about that because ancient hedgerows is pretty natural to our society and our. So I want to know what exactly is going to be happening when they're being taken out. How do they get replaced, or what happens to be replaced and the diversity that's lost within the hedgerows?
Yeah, in terms of the hedgerows, they're not ancient hedgerows. There's not a designation like ancient woodland. There's small amounts of hedgerows that will be removed for access points. So when they're removed, they are removed. But in terms of biodiversity net gain, there's a 12% gain in hedgerow units on this particular site. And again, this has all been agreed with the Natural Environment Team officer who's satisfied from an ecological perspective.
Final question is the fact it's like, I see the waterways. Can I see the picture of the waterways again? Do you mind at all? Because there's something that cops me on that one. It's showing the floodplains. It's that particular one I wanted to see.
Apologies.
No, it's okay.
Sorry, I just have to get this slide.
It's okay, please do.
Yeah.
Sorry for catching you out.
No, that's fine. Just getting the right slide, so there's quite a few.
Yeah, thank you.
My computer was quick enough to get there quicker.
That's right. Please take your time. Shall I ask the question anyway, see if you can gradually... Yeah, sure. The question is regarding the fact that I can see lots of floods areas and waterworks. Is there a potential possibility of tapping into the water table that is in the area to see where there's a problem? Because I'm thinking of the fact of the future planning application of the cable, which obviously I'll be looking at quite severely, to see whether or not it's actually going to create a problem with the table itself regarding tapping into it or breaking it in some way, because we do have a low threshold there.
So just to note, these are not actually waterways. This shows the flood risk mapping across the site. The Environment Agency, who's a statutory consultee in terms of water protection, have been consulted. They've raised no objection. There will also be a construction environmental management plan, which requires for any sort of waste and any pollution aspects to be dealt with from that perspective. So they're not actually waterways, that's the flood risk mapping. There's no sort of significant risk in terms of waterways and contamination, but the Environment Agency have confirmed that. And again, there'll be a construction ecological management plan that will deal with that matter.
My final question is the fact it's like the area is A and B, and also dark skies in some of it. I see your security lighting there is on 3.5 metre poles. And does it get triggered by wildlife and things like that? Because I'm thinking of the area being dark skies, and how many are there of these lighting systems? And what system do you have in place to make sure that it doesn't keep triggering off every time a deer or a sheep or something like that moves across? That's my question, Chair. Final.
On 3.5 metre poles are CCTV cameras, not lights. So they won't be emitting any light. We don't have the light details, but in discussions with the applicant, the lighting will be on a need-to-use basis, so it's not going to be on a sensor. If there's an issue on site in the hours of darkness, someone goes to site and they turn on a light to address that. We don't have the lighting details, so we've conditioned that prior to installation for those lighting details. We would, as the Cranbourne Chase National Landscape Officer asked for the reason to include the impact on the dark night skies, we would consult the Cranbourne National Landscape Officer, Cranbourne Chase National Landscape Officer on that matter. So at this point in time, we don't have the details. It is conditioned, but it's going to be on a need-to-use basis, and obviously it being triggered by wildlife, etc., would be a consideration. So I think my understanding it will be a switch on and switch off as required, which hopefully would be very rare, and maintenance will be done during the day.
Thank you. Councillor David Took, Cranbourne and Alderholt Ward.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, Councillor David Took, Cranbourne and Alderholt Ward. My ward is immediately adjacent to the ward where this plant is supposed to go. I want to address very special circumstances because I think that's probably the crux of the thing. The applicant says that there's 4 reasons, which is the temporary use of the site, the need for renewable energy, the generating capacity, and farm diversification. And those have been taken in turn. And it says in 17.1.5, temporary is limited wait. It's 40 years. 40 years is a long time. If I had a temporary sprain in my wrist for 40 years, it would be quite painful. Loss of best and most valuable land, 26 hectares of it, that's okay if it's temporary. But since you're not relying on temporary, then I think that removes that out of consideration for very special circumstances. The farm diversification is, as you say, not really relevant. It's not a planning consideration, which sort of leaves us with the fact that NPPF says there's a need for renewables. You don't have to prove the need, but so long as there are very special circumstances, it's okay. Well, if you say that that point is a very special circumstance of itself, it makes a nonsense of the whole clause. So I think that proving need doesn't prove very special circumstances. There's also issues with landscape input and the effect on the setting, which is visible from Horton Tower. And I don't know how many people know what Horton Tower is like, but it's a folly built a couple of hundred years ago. And it stands on top of a hill in a very prominent position, and you can see it from miles around, and from it you can see for miles. And the effect on the landscape from that tower will be noticeable for 40 years. And one of the issues, of course, is the cumulative landscape impact, which NPPF 165A says that cumulative landscape impacts must be mitigated. Now, we're looking here at 2 applications, one this time and one in about 10 minutes' time. But cumulatively, they will have a huge impact on the views from Horton Tower, especially in winter when there's no tree cover. And the only other thing I was going to say is, in terms of connection to the grid, 2028 apparently is date for connection, we've just been told. I would presume that the planning application for that connection would need to be approved before any construction on this site would begin. Otherwise, there'd be very little point in it. And that's my 5 pence. Thanks, Naomi.
I think there was any questions in there, but I might just come back on a few points. Is that okay, Chair? Or should I?
Thank you. I think the points that was raised by the Councillor Turk probably are asking for clarification and guidance. So I appreciate it's included in your report, but can I ask you to maybe just go over the understanding of temporary, the importance of and weight that's given to energy generation, and we had a number of slides which demonstrated the visual impact assessment over 1 year and 15 years. Maybe it would be helpful to go over those points and any additional items that you want to address.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Just on the point of temporary, in terms of the agricultural land, it's temporary in terms of 40 years. Again, it's a significant period, but in terms of agricultural land, it's reversible. So in 40 years' time, you will have agricultural land that can be used. There are benefits to leaving soil fallow, etc., to help it regenerate. So the 40 years isn't the point in terms of agricultural land is that it's reversible rather than it being, because it is a significant period of time. In terms of the weight energy generation is given, again, 168 of the NPPF, it's not required for an applicant to demonstrate the need. It is there. I've been collecting appeal decisions since I've started working on these applications, and you'll find the substantial weight that inspectors are giving to solar farm applications in terms of the renewable energy is generally the case. And then just in terms of views from Horton Tower, I've stood at Horton Tower with Historic England, the Dorset Council Landscape Officer and the Dorset Conservation Officer in January 24. January 24. And none of them have an objection to the proposed in terms of the impact on Horton Tower. The views I've showed in my presentation are the winter verified views, and they're the views that the Dorset Council Landscape Officer and Historic England, etc., that's what they've made their assessment on. But I have stood on site with all of them, and we've looked at the sites, and from their perspective, from their professional judgment, they do not consider there would be an impact on Horton Tower.
Thank you. Councillor, do you have a supplementary?
No, I'm not going to ask you supplementary because I think Naomi answered that, but I'm still not necessarily persuaded that the circumstances are very special. I think if you're relying on the need for renewable energy and generation capacity, they are pretty standard rather than very special. And the temporary use, we say 40 years. As you say, 40 years is a long time. But of course, that 40 years is not guaranteed. It never is. Because it's perfectly possible for another application to go in for another 40 years at the end of this 40 years. And whilst we can't take that into account now because we don't know, it doesn't mean that use is guaranteed temporary. So I'll leave it there. Thank you.
Councillor Borden.
That sounds better. Sorry. Belinda Borden, Lyme Regis and Charmouth. Could you just clarify on the loss of agricultural land? Sorry, I think you just mentioned a figure just now. However many hectares. So the woodland area is where it's currently used for sheep grazing, and that would continue. But so is the loss of agricultural land currently arable, or is that also sheep grazing? I was a bit confused. That's one question.
I'll respond, Chair, if that's okay. The woodland site, not the woodland, because I don't want to confuse, so the woodlands farm site, rather than saying the woodlands area, in case people think we're removing lots of trees to put in solar panels. The woodland site is currently used mostly for sheep grazing. There's some horse grazing on there at the moment as well, but there's an existing shepherd, and the intention is to continue that use with the existing shepherd on the woodlands farm site.
So it's not really a loss of the use of the agricultural land then, is it? Anyway, okay. So I was also going to ask, I think you mentioned that glint and glare is not an issue because the panels are absorb light, is that, did I understand that correctly? Because that's quite an interesting aspect, I think.
Yeah, so the technology has advanced in terms of solar panels. They're now better designed where they're non-reflective, and the purpose of them is to absorb the sunlight, not to reflect it. But also the location of neighbouring properties and their orientation. The panels will be facing south to maximise sunlight absorption, and the majority of the properties that are closer tend to be to the southeast or to the east, and there is significant vegetation around the site, and also with proposed mitigation planting that helps reduce the views of the site as well, as I've shown in the presentation.
And so, sorry, back to the biodiversity net gain. Did you say 74% increase and 12% from hedgerows? Is that from the woodland planting, the screening?
Yes, from the proposed planting, yes. And various grassland and there's, yeah.
Thank you. So members, are there any more technical questions or are we content to move to debate? Yeah? Okay, so if there are any points that anybody wishes to make by debate, show in the normal way. Councillor Borden.
Yes, thank you. On the basis of all the information provided, I'm happy to propose agreement with the conditions. It seems as if every mitigation that can be put in place to limit the visual impact, which is the main, for me, it feels like the visual impact is the main one. So I'd be happy to propose.
Thank you. Councillor Taylor's moved to second. Councillor Took, do you have something you wish to say?
Given that this is Greenbelt, and the only justification for it relies on very special circumstances, if there are not very special circumstances, it should be refused. I don't believe there are very special circumstances, so I will not be supporting this.
Thank you. Dave.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Councillor Dave Bolwell, Bridport Ward. I'm listening to what the members are saying. I think the judgment on whether they are very special circumstances or not, I think is quite clear in my mind, and I'm happy with the officer's recommendation on that. And accordingly, my view is that I'm going to vote for approval in this instance. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Does anybody else have anything else they wish to say, or are we content to move to vote? We have a proposal. It's been seconded. Yes, Councillor Taylor.
Chair, just confirming the conditions. Do we have to go through that before we actually agree and vote through? All the conditions are set.
Conditions are set, and the proposal is to go with the officer recommendation with the conditions as per the report. So if we move to vote now in the usual way, those in favour with a simple show of hands, please. Thank you very much. And those against? Thank you. And no abstentions. Thank you very much. So that's 6-1. Thank you. And that's P full 2023-03415 is resolved to approve. That's Woodlands Manor Farm, Horton, Dorset. Thank you very much. We're now going to take an adjournment of 15 minutes back here at 11:30. Hopefully that'll give everyone a chance to use the facilities, grab a drink, whatever you need to do.
Starting again, members.
Okay, members, welcome back. Hope you're all refreshed and good to go. So this is item agenda 6. This is being presented by Naomi Shinkins. It's P full 2023-02829. This application is for North Farm, Horton, Dorset. And we do have 3 speakers against on this occasion. So we're joined today by Colin Davidson, John Boyd, Rupert Hardy. We have public support from Peter Snell, and the applicant agent is the same with Liz Alexander. Now, public speakers have chosen to make their representations after the officer report, and so on that basis, Naomi, would you like to start your presentation?
Thank you, Chair, and good morning, members. It's still morning. So just to note, there's going to be quite a bit of repetition in this presentation, given the similarities between the sites. There may be some slides where I'll just skip over them, such as the national policy background and things like that, so I'm not repeating myself, but as long as that's okay with the Chair. And
in an officer presentation, that's absolutely fine. It's only on just a minute that there's no repetition, hesitation or deviation.
Great, thank you. Again, thank you, Chair. Good morning, members. This application is for a solar farm together with associated infrastructure at North Farm in Horton, which is to the west of the woodland site that I presented previously. This is for up to 19.8 megawatts capacity, and the application has been referred to Strategic Committee due to the scale of the proposed. So by way of update, similar to Woodlands, there's an error in the officer report. Woodlands is to the east of this site, and also the Cranbourne Chase National Landscape Officer would like the lighting condition reason to include the dark night skies reference, and also the LEMP requirement for the update to the LEMP is based on paragraph 189 of the NPPF. So in terms of location and context, again, the slide shows the application site within the wider area, not too far from the woodland site between Verwood and Wimborne St. Giles. And this slide shows the application site in relation to the settlement boundaries of Horton more to the south and Woodlands to the northeast. The designations in the surrounding area, again, includes Area Great Landscape Value, Sites of Scientific Interest, Dorset Heathlands, the Cranbourne Chase National Landscape, Nature Reserves, and Incham Woodlands. This slide shows it located within the Greenbelt, as similar as to presented in Woodlands. And this slide shows the 2 application sites together, so North Farm here, Woodlands here. This slide again shows both sites in proximity to the Cranbourne Chase National Landscape. And just to note that the National Landscape is adjacent to the access road of the North Farm site. This is the extent of the application site, and it covers almost 30 hectares in total in the form of 2 agricultural field parcels. The topography of the site is flatter than woodlands, but gently rolling, or some inclines and declines within the site, and again with well-vegetated boundaries. And the site access would be from Horton Road to the site, which is the existing access to North Farm. This slide shows the how well the site is connected via public right-of-ways. Again, quite a few between the Woodlands and North Farm sites, and then the E59-23 that dissects the North Farm site and continues to the National Landscape. The Manton substation is located to the southeast of the site. Again, the grid connection has been secured for 47.5 megawatts. The cable route, same as Woodlands, would form a separate application, and permission for the cable route is required to be granted prior to the commencement of the solar farm. So this again shows the operational renewable energy sites within a 6 kilometre radius. So again, Wedge Hill Farm, Verwood Solar Farm, Homeland Solar Farm, Bedburgh Solar Farm, the Holt Battery Storage System, and Woodlands as well that I presented previously. So the application site is surrounded by agricultural land in general, and again, the Cranbourne National Chase to the west and Horton to the south. Boundaries are well vegetated, particularly to the south and east, and the surrounding landscape is predominantly rural with a mixture of farmland, woodland, hedgerows, and some scattered residential properties. North Farm itself is located to the west of the application site. So this slide shows views across the site as labelled. So we can see view A and B. So A is looking north, which is this one, and B is looking to the southwest, which is the image below, and that's the site as existing. So in terms of the proposed development, smaller than Woodlands, again, smaller capacity, 26 hectares of the photovoltaic arrays in the 30 hectares of the application site. There will be 91 inverters, again, located below the arrays. Only 8 transformer units required at this time, 3 site storage containers, 1 switch room, boundary fencing, access tracks through the site, CCTV system, and the relevant communications and monitoring equipment. So as with the Woodlands site, this application was first received in 2023. The applications have always been progressed in conjunction with each other. Additional ecological surveys were also required on this site, and then revised plans based on these surveys were submitted in December 2024. Amendments include passing places added to shared footpaths and construction routes, the significant increase in hedgerow and tree planting, fence lines refined for ecology purposes, and panels removed from high-grade agricultural land. That was prior to this mission, which I will discuss later in the presentation. So this slide shows the proposed plan. Again, 2 parcels of panels with the containers and switch rooms located to the south down here. This section shows the topography, again, less undulating than the Woodland site, with some inclines and declines. Again, it's slightly flatter than the Woodland site, but we can see existing vegetation and proposed vegetation, which is shown on the section. The transformer units, there's, apologies, that says 21, that should be 8 because it's a smaller site. That's obviously a mistake based on the Woodland site. So there would be 8 transformer units, and they're approximately 3 metres in height, and they're dotted across the site. 1 switch room, 3.3 metres in height, again with some mitigation planting provided around it. There's a switch room here. This is a larger container, same as on the Woodland site, and located beside the switch room with the mitigation planting, about 2.9 metres in height, and 1 smaller storage container that's about 2.8 metres in height, and again located with the other containers and the switch room close to the mitigation planting. These are the security cameras on 3.5 metre poles, again located around the boundary fencing for security and monitoring purposes. And the same type of arrays will be provided on the North Farm site, again 0.8 metres above the ground to allow for sheep grazing. Yes, sheep grazing would also, the intention is to have sheep grazing on the North Farm site also. Typical fence, again, 2 to 2.4 metres in height, as you can see in the photograph, and would be around the boundary of this, around the solar arrays in terms of security and protection for them. Local representations, a few more, there was more objections on the North Farm site, there were 74 objections. The objections are listed on the slide, and again, a summary in the officer report and full comments available online. Key objections were similar to Woodlands in terms of visual impact on the national landscape, impact on greenbelt and heritage assets, the loss of agricultural land, the other forms of solar have not been explored, and also the cumulative impact. Comments of support are set out in this slide. Again, the visual impact can be mitigated, renewable energy is needed, the lifespan, it can be returned to the previous function after once decommissioned, and there's access to Mannington substation. In terms of consultation responses, it's the same as Woodlands. Knowlton Parish Council and Councillor Chakawata are objecting to it. Again, initial objections from the Cranbourne Chase National Landscape Officer and the Dorset Council Landscape Officer, who changed their responses to comments based on the revised designs and subject to conditions. Comments from Natural England regarding loss of agricultural land, and comments from the Right-of-Way team and the Ramblers Association regarding public right-of-ways. No objections from the Dorset Council Conservation, Tree, Environmental Protection, Lead Flood Risk Authority, Natural Environment team and Highways officers, and no objection from National Highways, Historic England, National Grids or the Environment Agency. In terms of background, I won't talk through this slide again. I've mentioned it in the Woodlands side, but the national targets, the net zero requirements, national planning, national policy statements, and also the local targets in terms of the Dorset Council climate change emergency. In terms of the officer assessment, this slide shows the key considerations as set out in the officer report. The following slide summarises this assessment, and all of which can be found in the relevant sections of the officer report. So the principle of development, again, there's objective 3 of the Christchurch and East Dorset local plan, and policy ME5, which encourages sustainable energy generation where adverse impacts can be minimised. And again, the National Planning Policy Framework, as set out on this slide, apologies, that refers to 2023, it should be 2024, as revised in December 2024. And again, paragraph 168, that the need does not need to be demonstrated, and the National Policy Statement for Renewable Energy, and emphasises the importance of the production of renewable energy. In terms of site selection, the site selection process that was carried out for Woodlands was done in conjunction with North Farm. Again, 83 sites were explored, and the most appropriate sites were considered to be North Farm and the Woodland site. So this has been reviewed. Again, the applicant has looked at brownfield sites, as I mentioned previously, 67 hectares available on the brownfield register, which is just barely smaller, but which is just, larger than the Woodland site. So in order to maximise the grid connection that they've secured of 47.5 megawatts, North Farm and the Woodland site have been identified as the most appropriate for sort of adhering to that grid connection. In terms of impact on the green belts, again, the NPPF states that inappropriate development is harmful to the green belt and should only be approved in very special circumstances. Harm can be assessed in both spatial and visual terms, considering factors like the visual impact, the volume, the duration, and the activity generated. Although the development is 40 years, it still impacts for a significant period of time. The NPPF acknowledges that many renewable energy projects in the Greenbelt are inappropriate and require very special circumstances to proceed. The development would contribute to renewable energy and national and local targets to reduce carbon emissions. However, it does have a harmful impact on the openness and is considered inappropriate development, and therefore substantial weight is afforded to the impact on the Greenbelt against the development. In terms of very special circumstances, a reminder of paragraph 153 and that the harm to the Greenbelt and any other harm needs to be clearly outweighed by other considerations. And the very special circumstances put forward by the applicant is the temporary use of the site, the need for renewable energy, the generating capacity and the farm diversification, and also a reminder about paragraph 160 and the proposal in terms of the environmental benefits and the increased renewable energy production, and how this is attributed significant weight in relation to this. In terms of the landscape and visual impact assessment, again, several designations in the surrounding area, not on the particular site, other than it being in the area of great landscape value. However, there is still, obviously, we have the Cranbourne Chase National Landscape to the west, which North Farm is in closer proximity to. It's within the same landscape character type of rolling wooded pasture and landscape character area of woodlands, coal hill and hill butts, which is the same for the woodland application site. And just a reminder that the key features of the landscape character area include quiet, peaceful countryside, largely unaffected by modern development, narrow winding lanes with high dense hedgerows, and the extensive network of public footpaths and tracks that I have shown on these slides today. So again, a similar outcome was concluded for the North Farm site, where the effects can be contained to the immediate site, and the medium to long-term distant views are generally screened by existing vegetation. I will show the same slides as I did previously for the woodland site, where it shows both sites together in terms of the viewpoints to the north on the edge of the Cranbourne Chase National Landscape, and from Horton Tower to the south, and showing the planting, showing it as existing, year 1 and 15 years. So this is as existing, again, from the north, where we can see North Farm and woodlands over here. And this is it with 1 year planting and 15 years of planting. And the view from the south from Horton Tower as existing, with 1 year planting, and the national landscape again to the west of North Farm, and 15 years of planting. So planting is proposed to mitigate the visual impacts of the solar farm. The planting has been amended in consultation with the Dorset Landscape Officer and the Cranbourne Chase National Landscape Officer. The Cranbourne Chase National Landscape Officer did request a larger planting stock, and that has been achieved. In terms of the planting to be provided on site, and that has been agreed. And the proposed planting is considered to be appropriate for screening visual impacts. With the proposed mitigation measures, it's considered that the proposed complies with policy HE2 and section 12 of the NPPF, and that the impacts of landscaping are given limited weight against the development in the planning balance. So just in terms of the planting, looking at it in more detail, this is from this view B here. The white dotted line shows the extent of the solar array development. This shows the public right-of-way, and this white line here shows where the additional planting would be to screen the solar arrays, and there would be tussock grassland planted here on this part of the site in terms of sort of trying to reduce the impact of the solar panels. In terms of the impact on the national landscape, so as previously mentioned, the E5923 public right-of-way does dissect the site and many surround it that leads to the Cranbourne Chase National Landscape. The National Landscape Officer raised similar concerns, although with more emphasis on the proximity to the national landscape, given its location. Again, the impact on the tranquil countryside, especially from the public right-of-ways, the industrial appearance of the proposed solar farms, the policy conflicts with the management plan, cumulative impacts with the other solar farms, and the impact of construction traffic. So similarly to woodlands, the Dorset Landscape Officer is satisfied with the additional information and revised mitigation planting, subject to based on securing the larger planting stock as in the revised planting plan. And in terms of construction traffic, again, the management plan is agreed with the Dorset Council Highways and National Highways. Given that North Farm is a smaller site, there's a prediction of 1 to 4 HGV vehicle movements over a 28-week period, and that is considered acceptable. And as is the same in Woodlands, there's conditions regarding lighting details, underground cabling, the appropriate planting stock to be in place prior to the installation of the solar panels, so there's mitigation in place before solar panels are on site, and there's some changes required to the landscape ecological management plan as set out in the condition in the officer report. Firstly to note, the applicant did initially look at a larger area for solar arrays, but did reduce this prior to the submission in order to reduce the impact on the national landscape and on neighbours. So we can see the sort of pink colour is where it extends closer to the North Farm and the boundary of the national landscape. But it's actually the red line is what is proposed. The submitted landscape visual impact assessment has considered impact on the national landscape, and the following slides show the extent of the site in context of the setting of the national landscape. And this view is from a view from the south down here, so we can see on the quay. And this is the view from the entrance at Horton Road. I should say this shows the extent of the site rather than proposed development, but you can see the topography of the site sort of raising up as you go towards North Farm. This is the viewpoint from the north, again showing the extent of the site, and North Farm and Old Down Cottages from the public right-of-way that's to the north up here. And this is a viewpoint from the east, looking towards the national landscape. And this is a viewpoint from the southeast within the site, again, looking towards the national landscape and North Farm, the building of North Farm in the distance. And a reminder of what it looks like with 15 years planting at the view from Horton Tower, and again, the national landscape to the west. Again, I need to bring to the attention of members the Countryside Right-of-Way Act and the statutory duty to seek to further the purpose of conserving and enhancing the natural beauty of national landscapes. Again, the government guidance notes, as far as reasonably practical, relevant authorities should seek to avoid harm and contribute to the conservation and enhancement of the natural beauty, special qualities, and key characteristics of protected landscapes. And in terms of that, it's, again, as I mentioned in Woodlands, it's agreed that the look of solar panels cannot enhance the national landscape. That is not reasonably practical. However, the site location and mitigation provided can conserve the natural beauty and contains the impact to the site itself. In conclusion, the impacts are considered limited to the site and immediate area with mitigation measures in place. The mitigation planting is expected to reduce impact, including cumulative impact, to an acceptable level. While primarily used for mitigation, the planting could also be considered an enhancement for some qualities of the landscape character area, which includes narrow winding lanes and high dense hedgerows. And finally, the proposal is temporary and reversible, which does help to mitigate the long-term impacts of the proposed. And overall, the proposal is deemed acceptable in terms of the visual impact and complies with the relevant policies in terms of the character of the area and the setting of the national landscape. And limited weight against the development is given in the planning balance in relation to this. So in terms of heritage assets, similarly to Woodlands, an extensive amount of listed buildings and heritage assets in the area. Again, Dorset Council Conservation Officer has surveyed the area and looked at the settings of all these heritage assets and only considers that potentially Horton Tower and Haythorne Cottage could potentially be impacted by the proposed development. So this slide shows the views of Horton Tower, which you can see over here. This is from outside the application site, so this is the public right-of-way that runs through it. North Farm is located over to the side here. Then you can see the extent of the application site also. So again, the Dorset Council Conservation Officer considers the impacts on Horton Tower to be minimal due to the distant views and natural vegetation screening, as can be seen on this slide. The same conclusion was reached for Haythorne Cottage, and the significance of the listed assets or their setting is not challenged, resulting in no harm. Similarly to Woodlands, Historic England initially objected to the proposed development, but again, I went on a site visit with the Conservation Officer, the Landscape Officer and Historic England, and we stood at various points around the site, and they agreed that there was no harm to the heritage assets and agreed with the Dorset Council Conservation Officer's view on this. And therefore, the proposed development is considered to have minimal impact on the heritage assets, resulting in no harm and therefore no weight afforded against the development in the planning balance based in relation to this. In terms of archaeology, again, there's archaeological interest around the site. Again, Paleolithic, Mesolithic, Neolithic, Bronze Age, Roman, British, and early and post-medieval. The county archaeologist has been consulted, and based on the information submitted to date in relation to archaeology, they're satisfied that there would be limited or no archaeological remains on the site that would be impacted by the proposed, and have raised no objection and don't require a condition for archaeological works, any further archaeological works on the North Farm site, which is different to Woodlands. Historic England also consulted on this point and have raised no objection and are in agreement with the county archaeologist, and therefore there's considered to be no harm in terms of archaeology and no weight afforded against the development in relation to this matter. Agricultural land. Similar to Woodlands, we have grade 2 and grade 3 most versatile agricultural land. The Natural England have been consulted on this again. The NPPF also emphasises the importance of retaining best and most versatile agricultural land. Natural England's comments do refer to the reversibility of the proposed development and also the requirement for soil management plans. So the same condition that's applied at Woodlands would need to be applied at North Farm in terms of soil management. I should note that the land at North Farm is arable farming land. The section of land that was removed from the development prior to submission is of a higher grade, and that's been removed. The applicant, again, is leasing the land from the landowner and needs to return it to its original state. The intention is to have sheep grazing at North Farm, same as Woodlands, but it is wouldn't be used for arable use. And in terms of that, the same as Woodlands, the loss of agricultural land is afforded moderate weight against development in the planning balance. In terms of residential amenity, nearest residential dwellings are 200 to 400 metres from the site boundary. The key issues will be the same as what I mentioned in Woodlands, so construction impacts, potential noise from inverters, potential light spill, visual impact, and the glint and glare is similar to the situation at Woodlands, where the panels are designed to absorb light and technology is improved where they're less reflective. And also the orientation of the panels would be obviously be facing south. So any properties facing that direction are sufficient distance away, but also sufficient existing and proposed mitigation planting will provide screening, suitable screening. So in terms of the noise, again, the noise levels for the inverters just needs to be verified as required by condition, and if there's any issue with that, a suitable strategy needs to be submitted. And also there would be a condition for construction management, the details of the lighting, and I think that's it in terms of conditions. And so the proposed landscaping and existing vegetation will reduce the visibility of the solar panels and the proposed is considered acceptable in terms of impact on neighbouring amenity and is afforded a limited weight against the development in the planning balance. So highways, the site will be accessed via the existing access from Horton Road. This also serves North Farm. North Farm is an arable farm. There's significant machinery entering and exiting the site on as required for the farm. Again, construction is likely to take about 28 weeks. However, it's a smaller site than Woodlands, so again, it would be average of 1 to 4 heavy goods vehicles that would be using the road on a daily basis. And again, the site traffic would reduce significantly, well, would be reduced except for maintenance purposes once it's operational. And the construction traffic management plan that's been submitted also considers the decommissioning phase. So again, no objections from Dorset Council Highways and National Highways. The Parish Council have raised concerns about road conditions, but again, it's already the access is already in use by significant farm vehicles accessing North Farm. And in terms of the highways impact, and access is considered neutral in the planning balance where there's no significant highways concerns. In terms of flood risk, this is the flood risk mapping, so it's within flood risk zone 1, similar to Woodlands. The Environment Agency has been consulted and raised no objection to the proposed. The Dorset Council, Lead Flood Authority have been consulted and raised no objection to the proposed, based on, again, the water runoff would not consider to be an issue where there's permeable areas below the solar panels. The proposed seeding would help reduce runoff. The gravel roads are reasonably permeable, and the areas of no permeability, such as transformer installation, are small enough that can be mitigated by sustainable drainage systems. So the proposed development is considered acceptable in terms of flood risks, subject to condition, and holds no weight against the development in the planning balance. In terms of trees and hedgerows are present across the site with well-vegetated boundaries and woodland areas. There's no tree protection orders on the site. And again, the development will occupy the majority of the field compartments, but there are setbacks to respect the existing landscape and vegetation framework. Again, some small areas for hedgerows will need to be removed for access, but there is a biodiversity net gain on the site also. And the Dorset Council Tree Officer has no concerns subject to conditions relating to tree protection and the landscaping details. In terms of biodiversity, again, there won't be an impact on sites of scientific interest or other protected sites in the surrounding area, so far enough away, and there has been an appropriate assessment carried out to identify no impact on the Dorset Heathlands, which Natural England have reviewed and agree with. Again, also in terms of North Farm, this is the existing baseline on the site. There were some concerns regarding biodiversity net gain and compliance with the Dorset Biodiversity Appraisal Protocol. As I've mentioned, extensive ecological surveys were carried out in 2024 as required and requested by the Natural Environment Team, which delayed the process of the application. The information that was then, the revised information that was then submitted was considered acceptable, subject to a few further changes that the Natural Environment Team Officer requested. Also, just to note, on the North Farm site, which is different to Woodlands, there's skylark mitigation that's required because there's skylark on the site. So the skylark mitigation would be provided within the blue line boundary that's submitted by the applicant. And there's a pre-commencement condition in the officer report requiring the strategy to be submitted and reviewed by the Natural Environment Team Officer. In terms of biodiversity net gain, there's an 80% net gain across the site. Again, it's not actually required on this site, given the application was submitted before February 2024, and therefore the biodiversity net gain is given moderate weight in favour of the development. So moving on to the planning balance, again, I need to remind members of the national targets, net zero strategy, national planning national policy statements, and also the local targets with the Dorset Council climate emergency, and also the substantial weight to be given to these. The planning balance is very similar to woodlands, as I've set out in this slide. So the in terms of considerations against, substantial weight to the harm to the greenbelt, moderate weight to the loss of agricultural land, limited weight to the impact on the character of the area, impact on landscape, impact on residential amenity, and impact on protected species. And then no weight to impact on heritage assets, highways, flood risk, Dorset heathlands, protected sites, trees, and mineral safeguarding. In terms of considerations in favour, substantial weight given to the need for renewable energy, the environmental benefits, and the public benefits, significant weight given to the location and the generation capacity, and moderate weight given to the biodiversity net gain, limited weight to the temporary use of the site, and no weight given to farm diversification or personal gain. Again, very special circumstances. The substantial and significant factors in favour, particularly the need for renewable energy and public benefits, are considered to outweigh the harm to the greenbelt and the harm caused by other considerations. Therefore, very special circumstances are considered to exist, justifying the proposal in accordance with 153 of the NPPF. So in conclusion, as presented on woodlands, on this slide you can see that all the planning considerations are considered acceptable, with most subject to condition. And therefore, my recommendation is to grant subject to the following conditions, which is similar to woodlands with some changes. So again, commencement approved plans and decommissioning conditions required. Pre-commencement include the cable route requiring planning permission. There's a LEMP update as requested by the Cranmore Chase National Landscape Officer, the Construction Environmental Management Plan, surface water details, soil management, construction management details, tree protection details. But in addition, here we need the skylark mitigation to be provided pre-commencement. Prior to installation, again, materials, hard landscaping details, lighting details, security camera details, and also that the approved planting is put in place prior to the installation of the panels. Compliance with the noise impact assessment, the ecological mitigation and biodiversity management, the construction traffic management, and then other conditions for cabling to be below ground. Any unexpected contaminated land that might be found needs to be reported, and also the construction hours. And that concludes my presentation.
Thank you very much, Naomi. Now we move to our public participation. I'm not sure if you have a preference in which order you come. I've got you as Colin, John and Rupert. Is that satisfactory? So, Colin, you'll have 3 minutes to speak. I will give you a heads up at 2 minutes 30 so that it doesn't come to an instant cut-off. And the time will start when you're ready to start.
Thank you. Let's be clear from the outset, this is not a climate-conscious philanthropic plan solely for the good of the planet. It's a commercial venture, and its impact on this corner of rural Dorset should be judged as such, and the precedent it might set. There are several issues that we feel have more negative resonance on the proposal than has been made prominent in the report. At present, there is no plan as to how to connect to the grid at Mannington. This will require multiple landowners' permission and planning consent. The report itself states we already have 9 similar and relevant developments in the surrounding area. Has this cumulative effect been adequately considered? Surely this would mitigate against the very special circumstances being applied here. The loss of open views from a footpath towards Horton Tower, a Grade 2 star listed building, by 2.4 metre perimeter fencing bisecting the 2 fields of panels, has not been adequately assessed as a significant negative to the amenity of the area for local population. The overall screening plans are optimistic in the extreme and could take up to half the proposed life of this industrialised zone to achieve. Is 40 years truly temporary? It will encompass nearly 2 generations. As a near neighbour of the proposed site, we can easily imagine the impact on this best and most versatile agricultural land, which borders an ancient woodland, is within the setting of a national landscape, and in sight of 2 historic buildings. Surely there are more appropriate places for this industrial energy production unit. Certainly the voice of local democracy thinks so. Our Dorset councillor, Will Chakawata, cannot be here because of work commitments, but asked me to convey his objections to the application, highlighting the weight of negative local opinion and that he supports the other points we've made. Likewise, Councillor Steve Butler, Chair of Knowlton Parish Council, cannot be here, but asked me, as a member of that council, to convey the council's unanimous objections, particularly on the loss of productive arable land and local amenity. I think there were also 74 local individual objections lodged on the portal. Fundamentally, we do not agree that the proposed national benefits around increased renewable energy or proximity to the national grid connection, although technically outside the 6-kilometre target, create a very special circumstances required to allow this development in this local belt. The positives do not outweigh the negative impact on the area of great landscape value and the character and amenity of this land. The swapping of an energy crisis for a food crisis is a price not worth paying. I ask the committee to think hard about allowing the scar in our countryside to be inflicted for generations. By the time of the planned removal, there will be precious few left who will remember the landscape as it currently is.
Thank you. I speak as a long-standing Horton resident and one of the 94% majority who made representations objecting to this application. I regularly walk the North Farm footpath, which bisects the intended solar farm, and dislike the prospect of walking between fenced, serried ranks of solar panels. I also enjoy the currently unspoilt views of the neighbouring countryside from Horton Tower and from Charlbury Hill. Any proposed screening would take years to mature and be ineffective half the year. Most of the solar panels used in this country are imported. Wherever they're made, they nearly always contain polysilicates produced in China, often using unethical labour practices. So they come with a substantial carbon footprint arising from both their production and their shipping. They need merely to be installed and connected to the grid to be operational. So there is a little value added provided by local Dorset labour, as would be the case with a residential development, and they use no local tradesmen. There is no local economic surge experienced due to the increased activity and no long-term economic benefit to the area. It is a sterile investment with most benefit accruing overseas and no enduring financial benefit to anyone except the applicant whose holding company is based abroad. Use of greenbelt land can only be justified in very special circumstances. The main special circumstances identified by the applicant are that this is the only land they could find reasonably close to the Mannington electricity substation and whose owners were willing to proceed. Alternative sites were allegedly investigated, but how many of those were simply farms whose owners turned down the applicant's approaches? I don't think that's good enough. It seems to me that the applicants have stopped looking as soon as they found a possible site and have made minimal effort to find sites with less environmental impact. The people of Horton, or indeed Dorset, do not owe the applicant a living. This application is an opportunistic business project looking for somewhere to operate. It is not driven by an altruistic desire to benefit the Dorset community, nor even the wider country by helping the nation reach net zero. There is simply not a good enough reason, with insufficient public benefit, local or national, to justify the loss of agricultural land and amenity value. Just because a project bears an environmental label, it does not mean that it invariably trumps the need for agricultural self-sufficiency or for maintaining greenbelt landscapes. I'm sympathetic to the need to protect our environment by decarbonising, but despoiling the countryside we have is no way to go about it. Thank you.
Thank you, John. I'm not sure if you've a military background, but that was to the second. And I appreciate that. Thank you. Rupert.
I'm chair of North Dorset CPRE, and we are fully supportive of renewable energy. The government has rightly prioritised wind power to supply the majority of our renewable energy needs, with solar playing a subsidiary role given its inefficiency compared to wind. We have argued that we can meet the government's solar target by focusing on rooftop solar, which is very underutilised, especially in Dorset, where over 90% of roofs still have no solar panels. Research from University College London shows that rooftop solar alone can meet much of the UK's solar targets, with long-term potential of 117 gigawatts, nearly 3 times the government target for 2030. It is much more widely supported by the public than greenfield solar. Dorset already has one of the highest numbers of approved solar farms in the country, despite the harm that these power plants can do to our beautiful countryside, which is a key attraction for tourists. Ed Miliband may pay lip service to the need for rooftop solar, but he's done little so far to forward its adoption. The government did not actively support a private member's bill, the Sunshine Bill, which sought to make it mandatory for all new housing to be fitted with solar panels, with a proposal adjourned for a second reading in July. Dorset Council has had the power, but has so far failed to demand higher energy targets than building regulations stipulate for new housing developments, unlike some other authorities. We are supportive of small, well-screened solar farms on low-quality land that do not impact on protected landscapes, heritage assets, or the amenity enjoyed by local communities. Sadly, this is not the case here, with a site to be built on best and most versatile land, which should be used for food production, impacting on both the landscape of the Greenbelt as well as the Cranbourne Chase national landscape, heritage assets, and the footpaths enjoyed by the local community. We do hope that Dorset Council's embryonic local plan will have stronger landscape policies in it, so solar farms can be better located. In fact, the officer's report pays scant heed to the harmful effect on the national landscape, with both the setting and views into it adversely impacted. Please note that Section 245 of the Levelling Up and Regeneration Act 2023 amended the Countryside and Rights of Way Act so that relevant authorities must seek to further the purposes of designation, which is conserving and enhancing natural beauty and not just avoiding harm when making decisions that affect land in a national landscape. Please protect our beautiful countryside. Thank you, Chairman.
And thank you, Rupert, for that timely response there. We now move to Peter Snell, who will be speaking in support. Peter, it's the same rules of engagement. It's 3 minutes, and I'll give you a 30 seconds heads up. Thank you.
Thank you for allowing me time to speak. My name is Peter Snell, and together with my wife, Victoria, and 2 young sons, we own and farm the land at North Farm, Horton. My family have owned the farm since 1979, and I lived and worked on the farm full-time since 2003, having previously worked on other farms and before that achieving my degree in agriculture. Farming has evolved rapidly in the 20-plus years that I've been at North Farm, and we have changed from a traditional mixed farm with arable and dairy production to a solely arable unit. Scale and lowering cost of production has been the core focus for arable farmers, and we have strived to farm more land and produce higher yields of wheat and barley and other crops. However, the commodities we produce are sold on a global stage, and we compete with imported grains from Eastern Europe and North and South America, where land areas are vast and economies of production are more favourable. EU and now UK subsidy policies have radically reformed in recent years, and together with geopolitics, war in Ukraine, trade tariffs, inheritance tax, as well as climate change, means that food production is a high-risk business. Industry figures show that 1 tonne of wheat 50 years ago would be worth approximately £600 a tonne today when factoring in inflation. However, wheat is currently worth about £170 a tonne. Coupled with poor commodity prices is the effect of rising input costs, fuel, fertiliser, and also the cost of machinery and labour. We can all relate to the current spiralling costs in all our professions, industries and life. This leaves agriculture further squeezed. That's not to say that we haven't adapted. We also produce thatching straw, grass seed for amenity use, grain maize for animal feed sold directly, and also sunflowers and pumpkins. Our business has grown also. The 700-acre home farm at North Farm is part of a wider 3,500-acre arable farming business where we rent land and work with farming neighbours, again, attempting to benefit from scale and greater efficiencies in the treadmill of trying to stay profitable. The proposed solar site at North Farm is another source of diversified income for our business, as well as contributing to our country's drive for net zero emissions and more renewable energy sources. The potential two fields for the development are well screened from view and are actually our two hardest fields to farm, being quite heavy clay and prone to lying waterlogged in the winter and droughting out in the summer. And if successful, solar panels won't preclude these fields from contributing to food production and wildlife. Sheep can still graze under the panels, and pollinators and invertebrates can thrive in the grassy areas too. We can also build carbon in the soil that would otherwise have been tilled for crops each year. For our family and business, the potential for a risk-free rental income from the solar site goes a long way to ensuring the future viability of our farming business. I would urge you to support the application. Thank you.
That was a courteous 8 seconds extra there. I hope you appreciate that. Liz, as agent, I invite you for your 3 minutes.
Thank you. The points outlined in the earlier Woodlands presentation are relevant to this application as well, and in the interest of brevity, we won't repeat these here. The application is also supported by a recommendation for approval with no outstanding technical objections on any topics subject to conditions. The proposal is clearly supported by all the policies relevant to the previous application, including the Council's declared climate and nature emergency, Clean Power 2030, and revised MPPF. This site can generate 19.88 megawatts, which would power over 5,000 homes with a proposed operational life of 40 years. The total capacity, as mentioned, of the combined projects at North Farm and Woodlands is limited to 47.5 megawatts by the grid connection and could not exceed this. This proposal would share the same grid connection as Woodlands, and this would be a shared underground cable, subject to a separate planning permission. Each submission has been carefully reviewed by our technical experts, and we have taken on board material planning considerations. Changes to the application have been made as a result. These have included revised additional planting for habitat creation and visual screening, the removal of some panels, and fence line refinements to support extra habitat creation. The development has similar planning considerations as Woodlands. It lies within approximately 300 metres of the national landscape. The positioning, topography, and low-level nature of the development proposed, together with the existing mature woodland and proposed additional planting, would limit exposure of the proposal within the national landscape. This has resulted in no objection from the landscape and national landscape officers, subject to planning conditions. And now to focus on some of the benefits of the proposals. The provision of renewable energy would help to support local and national targets, reducing carbon emissions and helping to decarbonise the grid. Extensive biodiversity net gain would assist with the Council's nature emergency. Joint economic and community contributions for North Farm and Woodlands would include 800,000 in community benefits, a total of 2.2 million of business rates over 40 years to support local services, local employment and contractor opportunities during construction and operation. Considering the two sites together, 13,500 homes would be powered, which makes a significant contribution to the 2030 solar target for South West England. Together, the projects would offset 14,000 tonnes of CO2 each year, the equivalent of taking over 3,000 cars off the road annually. We've talked about the sites being designed to support continued agricultural use and the biggest threat to food security being climate change itself. Thank you.
So, Naomi, is there anything you would like to come back on that? There's possibly, we spoke in the pre-meet about 106, it not being relevant and all the rest of it, and I noticed the applicant has just referred to £800,000 in community benefit. Maybe members would appreciate some clarity on that.
Yes, if I could just maybe make some points in terms of the speakers against, just to clarify a few points. Sorry, Mr. Davidson spoke about the commercial venture. It's a typical way of providing renewable energy projects, nor it's not a material consideration either in terms of the planning application. There was a question about how it's going to connect to the grid. We have the pre-commencement condition for the planning permission for the cable route. The cable route would form obviously from both application sites, and I believe the intention is to join them to reduce the amount of infrastructure required. In terms of the impact on Horton Tower and the impact from the public rights of ways, the impact from the public rights of way within the site is acknowledged and is acknowledged in the officer report. The officer report does refer to the impact being contained to the immediate site. But again, the Dorset Council landscape officer is satisfied it can be contained there and is satisfied with the proposed mitigation, as is the Cranbourne Chase National Landscape Officer, who specified the planting stock and the more mature planting stock. The site selection, the applicant has gone through a site selection process, and again, they've looked at brownfield sites. There is actually no requirement for them to go through a site selection process. It's not required by the National Policy Statement. It's not required by national policy either. So they have done this, but it's not actually required by policy. In terms of Mr. Boyd, he spoke about, again, the impacts on the public right-of-ways. Again, the Cranbourne Chase National Landscape Officer has specified a more mature planting stock so that mitigation can be in place as soon as possible. There was mention about economic benefits. The economic benefits aren't considered in the planning balance, and that hasn't been referenced in that planning balance. So we haven't given that any weight, and it's acknowledged that materials may have to come from China, etc. Unfortunately, I don't believe there is a solar panel producing opportunity in the UK at the moment, but my understanding is if there was, the applicant would look to do that, but that's not relevant because it's not there. In terms of the response from Mr. Hardy, he spoke a lot about the potential for rooftop solar. I know Dorset Council is doing its own rooftop solar works where they're looking to put as many solar panels as possible. But if you look at our climate change emergency strategy, we need more than the rooftop solar, and we also need solar farms and wind turbines. Also, rooftop solar would require a significant amount of individual investment from individuals, and to realise the grid connection capacity of 47.5 megawatts would be a big undertaking by a rooftop initiative, and I don't believe there's a county-wide initiative to achieve that either at this point in time. Again, the harm would be restricted to the site, just in terms of agricultural land, the comments made on that, I think Mr. Snell pointed that out himself, about the arable production of those particular land sites, and I believe those two fields only form about 8.7% of the actual arable land within Mr. Snell's holding. And then just the points on the Rights of Way Act and further to seek, I have brought that to members' attention and put it in the officer presentation. And Chair, just your point on the Community Benefits Fund, the applicant has mentioned that it's not being secured by legal agreement. It's not been considered in the planning balance because we can't secure it by legal agreement. It wouldn't meet the tests that would require it to be secured by legal agreement. But my understanding, it is a benefit that's there for the parish council to engage with outside of the planning process. And obviously we would encourage that.
Thank you very much. So we now move to members. If you have any technical questions, this is the time. So we have Councillor David Taylor, Charnock to St Mary's.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, Councillor David Taylor, Charnock St Mary. Bits of observations, really, noticed as you're going through the explanation of it all. The view we've had a problem with, not with the last one, because it's got lots of foliage and everything else hiding things away and growing power of 15 years. But what I can see is the fact that with the views, Cranbourne Chase, etc., it is going to be seen. There's no way of hiding it. It's literally going to be there, and that's where the solar panels are. You can't miss it, really. So that's one of the points on that one there. The other thing as well about the trees, I noticed that there is a maturity of trees on the site, no TPOs, tree protection orders, that is. I'd just like to know that as a condition, if we could actually look at the stock, because some of those trees look as though they're oaks and incredibly old, and look at some TPOs on that score. What was the final one? Oh, gosh, I've got blank my mind. Can you move on? Sorry, and that's the two on that one there. I've come to... Have I? Yes, I have. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. So I think that was one statement and one request for TPOs.
Yep, so in terms of tree protections, do you want to make your point?
It's just a final point, sorry. Yep. The final question was on slide 68, was the fact of the Lark Hills, I believe, birds. Skylark, sorry, they're on that one there. Aren't they a protected species at the minute? And if I remember the programme last night, they are being endangered, and so what protection is being put in case for them? Thank you, Chair. That's the Chair. That's the final question.
Thank you. So I'm sure the officer can confirm, but that's precisely why there is a mitigation requirement conditioned for that species.
I think you noticed that we should condition tree protection orders. We can't achieve that by condition. What we have done, the majority of vegetation will be retained on the site. Again, some loss of hedgerows for access, as I mentioned, on woodlands. The tree officer has requested tree protection condition, which is required pre-commencement. So the tree protection to ensure those trees will be safe is required pre-commencement and will be checked by the tree officer. So that is to the satisfaction of the tree officer. In terms of skylark, yes, they are a protected species. The Natural Environment Team officer has reviewed the application. The applicant submitted a blue line boundary around the red line because the site is within the same ownership, and mitigation can be provided within that blue line boundary, and we are able to condition within the blue line boundary. So the Natural Environment Team officer is satisfied that a mitigation strategy can be achieved and has been secured by a pre-commencement condition.
Thank you very much. Councillor David Took, Cranbourne and Alderholt Ward.
Excuse me. Thank you, Chair. Naomi, could you put up slide 47, please? Sorry, I didn't mean to make you... That's not actually the one I noted down. It's 47 on the bottom corner. So, which was where you were discussing Greenbelt and paragraph 160 of the NPPF. No, it was just a text area. But what you did in that was highlight that paragraph, that's it, paragraph 160 of the NPPF. 35, is it? For some reason, I read a 47 in there. Old age and senility, possibly. What it says, and you highlighted it, that in this respect, it's the wider environmental benefits from increased renewable energy production can be taken into account. The first part of that paragraph, which you don't quote in full, says when located in the Greenbelt, elements of many renewable energy projects will comprise inappropriate development. In such cases, developers will need to demonstrate very special circumstances if projects are to proceed. And you talk about very special circumstances, and my concern here is the same as last time, in that the fact that it's temporary does not really comprise a very special, because it's 40 years and it can be renewed. You've got, and number 4 is not a planning matter. So you're left with items 2 and 3.
Councillor, is there a question with this? Is there a question with this? I wait in anticipation.
I thought I had that on. Sorry. It was. What you're saying effectively there is, if it's a renewable energy project, then the fact that it's a renewable energy project comprises of itself very special circumstances. And I don't think that makes logical sense. And I don't, so my question is, you mentioned appeals decisions that have supported that. Can you mention any examples of that, just to satisfy us that this is indeed very special circumstances?
Yes, I can. A appeal decision on the 18th of July 2023, land at Crays Hall Farm, Church Lane, Crays Hill. The inspector in that decision concluded that the benefits of the renewable energy amounted to very special circumstances for development in the Greenbelt that was inappropriate development. So that's just one specific appeal statement that I've
David, if when speaking I could encourage you to use your mic and then nobody misses out on your contribution.
That's all fine. I personally disagree with the idea. The English language is a strange beast, but it seems to be saying that if it's a renewable energy project, it needs to ensure that there's very special circumstances. Oh, and being an energy project, that is a very special circumstance. It just makes no sense to me. However, you've answered the question. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Belinda Borden, Lyme Regis Ward.
Oh, thank you. You've just introduced me. On that slide, are the biodiversity gains and the carbon emissions that are not released by ploughing and the better soil management that are put in place by the mitigation plans and the conditions, are they counted as part of these environmental benefits, or are the environmental benefits for the purposes of very special circumstances simply measuring the renewable energy gain? So are these other environmental benefits, the biodiversity net gain and the carbon storage from leaving the ground for grazing and not ploughing, are they measured in that as well?
I'm going to take you to the planning balance that I did. The environmental benefits, in my mind, when I was doing this planning balance, is the provision of renewable energy. I've given the biodiversity net gain moderate weight in favour of the development because while it's not required for this application because of the timescales of it, it's required in general now. If they were to apply now, they would need provide at least 10%, but I've given it moderate weight because it's 80% in this particular instance. So I've separated that out. I haven't actually given a weighting to the potential for the soil to improve, etc., because it's the loss of the agricultural land, which I gave moderate weight against the development. So that isn't actually a benefit that I added to my planning balance.
And could I ask another question, which was just to clarify the thing that you said sort of towards the end about rooftop solar. It can't be an alternative, that we need all three rooftop solar farms and wind energy to achieve our emissions or increase in renewable energy. Could you just clarify how you said that? Thanks.
If you go to the Dorset Council website and the climate change emergency, it's requiring to provide solar, wind, and rooftop, but basically any form of, because we've got there's lofty targets to meet. It's done in terms of the net zero targets. It's done in 5-year rolling budgets, and I believe the UK have met the first 2, and we're not currently on target to meet the next rolling budgets. So I think the point is to try and get renewable energy, appropriate renewable energy, through as many means as possible. I just have to mention that every application has to be assessed on its own merits. Members aren't considering whether we're doing a solar farm or rooftop here. You're just considering the solar farm. So,
thank you very much. Does that satisfy your question? Are there any other technical questions to ask of the officer? No? If not, I'm content to move to debate if there's anything that anyone would like to say. Councillor Belinda Borden, Lyme Regis.
Thank you. I probably should have started the previous one with this, but recent polling in April showed that 75% of the general public are concerned about climate change and that it's a serious issue that needs immediate attention. Additionally, 65% support stronger government policies to reduce carbon emissions and promote renewable energy. Moreover, 85% of people aged 18 to 34 express significant concerns and want more aggressive climate policies. So I'd like to actually commend the officer on the really good responses to the public concerns, because I think everyone's concerns are valid. But certainly the big picture for me is that we do need to do this. The detailed picture is that strikes me that an awful lot of mitigation and careful technical expertise has gone into making the landscape impacts as minimal as possible. And I think it's very interesting hearing from, is it Mr. Snell, about the need for the farm to be able to thrive, because the government is subsidising, although they have just taken away the Sustainable Finance Initiative, but that will come back, so that the need for public good and for wildlife planting and biodiversity increases is important, and that this project will actually enable that as well as the generation of renewable energy. And the things that we learnt earlier on about this, the technology means there's little glare, that won't be, the lighting will only be as and when needed. And I do think that the overall benefit is has been demonstrated. So I would like to propose accepting with the conditions.
Thank you very much. So we have a proposal to go with the officer's recommendation and all conditions thereafter, and that has been seconded by Councillor David Taylor, Charminster St Mary's Ward. Before we take that to a vote, is there anything else that anyone would like to say? No? Okay. So in the usual manner, with a simple show of hands, those in favour of resolving this item to approval, please show your hands. And those against? Thank you very much. So the outcome of that is 6-1, and P full 2023-02829 North Farm Horton is approved. Do we have any urgent items? No? And any exempt business? No. Okay, thank you. So thank you all for your patience this morning, and thank you all for being mindful for your time when speaking. That is much appreciated. I'd like to thank Phil Crowther, our senior lawyer, for his support this morning, Megan and Anthony for their Democratic Services support, and Kim for supporting Naomi, and Naomi for your presentation. I think whichever side of the fence we sit on this one, I think we can all agree on the quality of that report, and I certainly appreciate the mapping and the quality of the photographs. We really do. Yes, no Venn diagrams. So, but you can speak to Matt Poachin-Hawkes about that. He's very, very good with that. But I think we can all agree Dorset is a beautiful place, and hopefully this will, in the long term, help protect our environment. Before we go, I would just like to thank Ben for joining us today. Good luck with your studies. I hope this work experience hasn't put you off, but if you do want to change your skill set and go into nursing, I think there are opportunities there as well. So the meeting is now closed at 12:49, and thank you all.